Welcome, everyone, to the 757 Express Executive Corner. This is a community conversation with leaders in the 757 on issues that matter to the community. Today, I am excited to welcome Ms. Michelle Ellis Young. And let me tell you what a program we have in store for you. She is a proud native of New Orleans, a graduate of Seton Academy High School for Girls. She's a trained communicator who earned her bachelor's degree at the University of Houston in radio television. Then she moved to Hampton Roads to continue her studies at Hampton University, where she earned a master's degree in counseling with a focus on college student development. She has also furthered her educational endeavors as a doctoral student at West Virginia University. She is described as a connector of people and resources. She's passionate about service and the development of people, especially women and young girls, and helping them to actualize their passion and development and purpose. Michelle serves as the Chief Executive Officer of YWCA South Hampton Roads, where she stewards the organization's mission, and we're going to talk about that shortly. She is so active in the community and with several civic organizations. If I listed them, we'd be here for hours. What I'm also impressed by is she is also an ordained minister and certainly a strong woman of faith, which I think is so important in our community. So welcome, and do you have any time to sleep with all of your activities?
I sleep on the job. No, it certainly is a pleasure to be here with you and not passing by you. And so I'm grateful for this time that we have together.
Absolutely. And, I have seen her work at the American Red Cross. She is a tremendous leader, a wonderful communicator, and it's our honor to have you with us today. So let's jump right in. Your mission of the YWCA is to eliminate racism, empowering women, and promoting peace, justice, freedom, and dignity for all. That's a mouthful, and certainly something we need in 2022. Can you talk about how you take on such a large mission?
Absolutely. And, when I think about the work that transpires through any YWCA, not just here in Hampton Roads, it's a great humanitarian work. And so here in Southampton Roads, when we think about the work of the YW, we think about our work really from two perspectives, from a systems perspective and then from intersectionality and what that really means to the work that we do every single day. And so the work of our YW in particular is a work that brings together stakeholders from various experiences. And so when we talk about the work that we do to eliminate racism, empower women, and then promote peace, justice, freedom, and dignity for all, we have to make sure that the people impacted are parts of those decisions and conversations as well. And so our work really centers around a few areas. It centers around systems mapping and looking at systems in order to break down racist policies, procedures, and the way we think and look at things. And so it really is beyond what we talk about DEI or DEIB or J. That's the good work. That's necessary work, foundational work, and fundamental work. But anti-racist work goes a step further, because now we're truly impacting people personally, and you're reevaluating yourself personally to add personal accountability and personal responsibility in every single phase of how you operate. So our systems mapping work does that. Our work through our Norfolk Family Justice Center does that, because it provides that holistic approach to servicing victims of violence, whether that be sexual assault, intimate partner violence, domestic violence, or gun violence, and making sure that we are working collaboratively with all of the partners that will take care of that person to bring whatever form of justice they demand for their situations. And then we look at it from a perspective of, if we are the organization whose first mission is to say eliminating racism, then we have to make sure we're providing that technical assistance across Hampton Roads to ensure people are equipped to be able to move beyond DEI work and really lean into, what does it really mean to be anti-racist? What does it really mean to build an anti-racist community and to be an anti-racist leader and an equitable leader? And so we put all of those pieces together, not just for ourselves internally, but really to be a catalyst for that transformation that needs to happen externally in our communities every single day.
That is a tremendous response, and certainly as the senior executive at Hampton Roads Transit, there may be some opportunities we'd like to have you come in and speak to our senior team, because while there's been so much focus on diversity, equity, and inclusion, and that is absolutely critical work.
Absolutely.
You're talking about taking a step further than that, which really touches upon the fact that we all have inherent biases.
Absolutely.
But a lot of us don't know what our biases are. So I think it's important for all of us to be aware, so that we're not excluding voices
Absolutely.
from the conversation.
Absolutely.
I was going to ask you this later, but I want to touch upon it now, because you mentioned the whole issue of violence, and it's really been alarming, I guess, the last month or so, where we've seen a substantial uptick in violence and shootings in our Hampton Roads area. And it's not just one city.
Correct.
It's all the cities. And I think we as urban planners have learned, I think for some time, people thought, hey, I live in this wonderful suburban neighborhood, I'm away from that. But the bottom line is, what touches one of us touches all of us. And eventually it may start in perhaps a more urban setting, but it ends up in the suburbs and everywhere else. So it's a problem for all of us to consider. So as our cities, and just this past Friday, Robert Crum, who's with the Planning District Commission, convened a discussion with the area mayors who are trying to come up with some collective policies, thoughts, recommendations on how to address this uptick in violence. So, given your expertise, are there any suggestions you would have? And certainly, I'm going to let Robert Crum know that you're available, because I know he's a planner and he's looking for how to, facilitate a conversation with subject matter experts to really help advance the region. That's important work. So any thoughts, suggestions, recommendations, ideas, or anything?
Well, violence is not a Band-Aid approach. We have to step back and take a look at the why. There is an absolute why that we know for a fact that permeates violence in community. And when you have a traumatized people, you're going to have a traumatized community. And when you have a traumatized community, people in it start to act out, whether that's through gun violence, through domestic violence, which we're seeing a startling increase in intimate partner violence and sexual assault violence. And so when we don't treat trauma in community, we will see the residual impact of it. And it shows out as early as little children who don't know how to problem solve, don't have the necessary critical thinking skills, and don't make wise choices and decisions. And if we don't treat that childhood trauma, it grows and it becomes an adult. And then it becomes an adult who doesn't have
Yes.
critical thinking skills, who doesn't know how to problem solve, who doesn't make the best choices. And then we see it show up in community. And you're absolutely right. It is no respecter of person. We can change our zip code. We can change
Yes.
our area code. We can upsize. We can downsize. But the fact is, when trauma shows up, it will show up however it chooses to, wherever it chooses to. And so my call would be to say, we really need to make sure when we're having these conversations of why things are occurring in community, we really need to look through a therapeutic lens. We need to look at what are the triggers that cause people to do what they do. I used the example of the young man who went on a spree a couple of weeks ago and killed 3 people and said, I probably was going to kill some more, because that's his mindset. He said he felt stuck and he felt, and I'm not validating what he did, because it
Sure.
was absolutely wrong on many levels. But if you really listen to what he's saying, he's a product of trauma that went untreated. And until we start to deal with people and trauma and just shaking it off as they'll get over it, they'll get past it, pray your way through it, until we really start dealing with the root cause of why people do what they do, which is based in trauma, we will see violence continue to do what it does, show up in every city, in every zip code, in every community.
Wow. I mean, we could end the interview here. I mean, I'm just moved by your statements, and I have a daughter who's in law school now, but she was a dean of students at a charter school, and she was really all about restorative justice.
Absolutely.
And trying to help, saying the same kinds of things that, you know, back when I'm dating myself a bit, I mean, people would say, what's wrong with
I'll
you?
sit with you in the
Okay.
day.
What's wrong with you not really trying to understand why is this person acting that way? So
yeah.
I think this is next level conversation that needs to happen. So if some people start calling you, asking you to participate in some discussions, you can blame me.
Okay,
Because,
all right. I'm going to say, stop, William. We got enough. I'm one person.
Absolutely, absolutely. So we can come back now to diversity, equity, and inclusion. There was a lot of focus on that, you know, after the obvious tragedy with George Floyd, sparked discussions, and it was really a touching point for me as an African American professional, where people were really open and getting, you know, their feelings out and wanting to know my perspective, and you know, a lot of progress was made, but I think things are kind of starting to move back to a state of normal. So just kind of want to get your feel, you know, being a leader of the oldest and largest multicultural women's organization in the world, you know, how can we keep this whole issue of diversity, equity, and inclusion going? How do you grow efforts? What are your thoughts there?
Sure. And you know, you used the word going back to normal. And I love to just play with that for a minute and sit in it for a minute, because when I think about what was, there was nothing normal about it.
Yes.
And so, you know, as we start to reemerge into society, you know, with things opening up, with our workplaces going back into the office and what that looks like for us, there are a few things here. I think people are going to demand different, because they've had an opportunity to sit however they sat in all of what has transpired and really figure out from a values perspective what matters most to them in the places that they show up. And we know people spend the majority of their time in the workplace. And so people are making conscious and intentional decisions about what showing up means to them. And when they show up, how they want to be handled and treated when they show up. And so I think people will start to drive the change that we need to see in our communities. But as the oldest women's humanitarian organization, you know, when I think about what does it take for us to keep the momentum, to
Yes.
not digress or regress, to make sure that we're honoring what we felt
Yes.
2 years ago in that moment. And let's be honest, that was just because people saw it for
Yes.
themselves in the stillness of a pandemic. There are many folk who've been experiencing that far
Yes.
beyond 2020. And so when I think about how do we maximize the moment, it's going to take individuals who really look at the world truly, not from the DEI, making sure you honor people's differences, making sure you're supportive, making sure that there's access and equitable and fair treatment of people, but it's really going to take an anti-racist lens, because it's a personal lens that each of us have to make a conscious and intentional decision to say, I don't want to go back to what was. I didn't like that. I want something new that's sustainable, that allows people to show up. And when they show up, they can be authentic and they can be whole. And so it's going to take not just folk who look like us, but it's going to take folk
Yes.
who don't look like us to show up in these spaces and ready and armed to walk into what really it means to be a transformational anti-racist Hampton Roads.
Absolutely. That's very powerful, and I think a lot of people need to hear that message and take heed. Let's talk about transportation for a moment. Certainly something that's near and dear to my heart, and certainly something that we've learned over the years is important in terms of opportunity. In many cases, those underserved communities haven't had the transportation linkages to where the jobs are. When I was in Richmond, there were new shopping areas, Short Pump, and the various places there, Stony Point, where there wasn't a lot of public transportation. So in order to get a job where the new jobs were, you needed a car.
Right.
So Richmond, one of the things we worked on was trying to improve public transportation. I'm proud to say we received support from the 2020 session of the General Assembly to create a backbone system in Hampton Roads. And a lot of people don't understand the fact that up until this time, and we haven't yet begun major implementation, because we have to buy new buses, we have to hire new operators, you name it. But we have a very disjointed system in that each of our 6 member cities, Hampton and Newport News on the peninsula, as well as the 4 largest cities in Hampton Roads, being part of the service area. Each city has this unique transit day. Some cities like Norfolk, which is more urbanized, has transit going until 2 in the morning. I'm a Chesapeake resident, former city manager of Chesapeake. A lot of the Chesapeake services may end at 7:30, 8 o'clock. I was getting my hair cut, personal story, soon after I got here, and there were some folks from Norfolk that caught a bus to Chesapeake. They got their haircuts, but they checked at the bus line and it stopped service. So the barber literally had to drive them back to Norfolk. So that's an example of disjointed service. So if you're navigating the region by transit, it can be very difficult. We got business support. The 6 cities supported Hampton Roads Transit, and for the first time in our history, and this is since the creation of Hampton Roads Transit in 1999, we have dedicated funding where we will have 13 backbone routes that will have 15-minute service. So it doesn't matter whether you're in Norfolk, it doesn't matter whether you're in Newport News or Virginia Beach. It's going to take us several years to implement that. We're beginning in October of this year. provided we can hire enough operators, we're going to start on the peninsula because they've been underserved
Yes,
for years.
yes.
So we made a intentional decision to start on the peninsula. So that's going to be an important part of really increasing the resilience of our region, which hasn't recovered as quickly
That's
as
right.
many other regional areas. Now, we have done a fantastic job improving roads, bridges, and tunnels. And Hampton Roads Transit is a strong supporter of that because our buses and vans use roads, bridges, and tunnels all the time. We've spent over $5 billion on roads, bridges, and tunnels. So we are just beginning to deal with the other side of the equation. Transit is part of the equation. So can you speak to us about the importance of transit in terms of people that you serve and communities that you work closely with?
I absolutely can, and I'll speak from a personal perspective. My stepfather was a RTA bus driver for
Oh, wow.
43 years in New Orleans, Louisiana, and I am the product of public transportation. And jokingly always vowed that I would always own my car because I didn't want to have to ride a bus in my adult life. I did enough of it
Sure.
in my childhood. So I directly understand the importance of both having personnel to do the work, but also what it means to community in order for individuals to get from here to there. And to this day, my mother's never driven a car. She rides a bus. She lives with us now, but she's always been a public transportation passenger. And so when I think about the clients that we serve, those that have been victimized in some type of way, marginalized in some type of way, and they don't have access to go out and put a $500 down payment on a over rate car, percentage wise, or to go and get a car. So transportation is their connector, it's the source. But they can't make a living wage on all of the workforce development types of positions that we have going on if they can't get from their home to that place or vice versa. And so, it greatly impacts our clients. It greatly impacts some of our workers who work for us. And so we're always constantly looking at how do we reduce the barriers for our clients that they have ease of access to get from a shelter, unfortunately, to a job interview, to the grocery store. And so nonprofits like ours and many of our sister nonprofits, we take on through funding the burden of those reductions of barriers for our people, because sometimes public transportation is just not the answer to get them where they need to be in a sufficient amount of time. And so I'm excited, quite frankly, to hear about the investments that are being made in public transportation, particularly in this area. I know when I moved here in 1992, I scratched my head because I had a car, but the first thing I thought about, literally would have conversations with people, is, but what do you do if you don't have a car around here?
Yes.
How do you get around this place? And if we're talking about leveling the playing field, and not even leveling the playing field, but making it an equitable playing field, we have to look at all of those points of entry that give people access to what we're dangling somewhere else in a system that says, come over here and get this and change your life. But if I want to change my life, but the only thing holding me to being able to transform and change my life is I gotta get there first, then we have some problems. And so that's what that means for our clients, is that we have to figure out, and it's not just our clients, it's people in community. It's people who have cars who don't want to drive those cars.
Absolutely.
So we it's not just our marginalized communities or those that are in dire situations, but it's how do we build a better community that public transportation does not have a stigma to it, that it's not for those confuse people that it's unreliable, it's not accessible. How do we look at that more holistically? It's through the lens of the people who have to use it every single day. Why? Because they have no choice but to rely on it. As awful as people might think it is, they have no choice in the game. And so that's why it's important. It's because they're people, the only way they can have hope, the only way they can be healed, and the only way they can be helped is through means that get them from point A to point B and back again.
I'm excited you said that, and one of the things, depending on where I am, the audience, there's a lot of interest in what we call choice riders. You and I who may choose to ride transit, and I am excited with higher gas prices. That's the only good thing about higher gas prices. I think we'll be able to attract more choice riders.
Right.
But what really warms my heart is knowing that we're going to have better service for the transit dependent.
Yes.
Those customers
Yes.
that have no other choice.
That's right.
I want them to feel dignity.
Yes.
You're going to
Yes.
see more shelters going up. We're adding solar lights. We have over 2,500 bus stops with only about 300 or so shelters. We're drastically increasing that. 600 additional shelters.
Awesome.
Nothing hurts my heart more than to see our customers sitting on a cart or it's a grocery cart or whatever. We are going to make a difference in the lives of people. And I'm really
Yes.
excited that we're going to use this money in a positive way. I want to thank the General Assembly. I want to thank the federal government, our key stakeholders, our 6 member cities that are funding important work that needs to be done for our community.
People deserve courtesy, dignity, and respect, no matter
Yes.
what their stage or spectrum is in life. And the fact that someone can stand under a lit bus shelter in a storm
Yes.
does so much for them in that particular moment than probably a few other things in their day, because they know that was at least the one thing that went right that day.
Absolutely.
I didn't get wet.
Yes, that's so important. I tell you what, at this point, I'm going to end this discussion. I want to give you an opportunity to share anything you like with our viewing audience. We want to have you back again. I'm so excited about the work that you're doing. I'm excited about who you are as a person. I'm also excited about the energy that you bring to a very important topic. That's sensitive to many, but it's necessary conversation that we have to have
Absolutely.
as a community.
Absolutely.
So would you like to share anything with our audience?
Well, I thank you for that time. And let me first say, I'm honored to be in this space with you. I see the Red Cross
Yes.
award over there.
That
that
you
makes me
guys
proud.
gave us,
One
yeah.
of the last acts that I was able to do over with that incredible organization. But I have the privilege to steward another incredible organization, which is the YWCA Southampton Roads. And I just would encourage your viewing audience, your team members that are here, to be grateful, first of all, because the work that we do is not a pretty work. It's not a work that people are eager to talk about. No one really wants to talk about racism, and no one really wants to talk about violence or domestic violence as well. And so gratitude is always at the center of the work that we do. So be grateful that it's not you. And if it is you, know that you have a way of escape through help by calling our crisis hotline at 757-251-0144, because there's always someone there to be able to help anyone, male or female, in the time of need. The other thing that I would encourage your team members and your viewing audience is to think about, what type of community do you really want to live in? Is this just a place where we talk about all the time, I want Hampton Roads to be a place where we all can live, work, and play and worship. But if we're doing it in silos, because you're over there and you're over there, because we haven't figured out what community truly means in its diversity, in its difference, and in our ability to be able to come together, even in our differences, then this is the type of organization, the YWCA Southampton Roads, that you need to link arm in arm with, because we're on a mission, not just this is not a sprint for us. This is a marathon for us, and we know that the work of diversity, the work of DEI, and the work of anti-racism is not a shortcut type of work. It's a work that requires constant and continuous nurturing, because we have to self-reflect all the time. And so I would encourage your audience to think, when they're thinking about their giving, think about YWCA right here in the backyard. We've been here for 115 years. Right here serving this community. And so we have a stake in the game, right? We care about this community. We want to see this community healed from its hurts. We want to see this community healed from its trauma, so we can get to living and working and playing and worshiping together and feeling safe and secure right here in our own environment. So go to our website, YWCA-SHR.org, and come to mission in a number of ways. You can come through your time, you can come through your talents, you can come through your treasures, and you can come through your testimony.
Oh my goodness. Thank you all so much. This will be continued.
I'm looking forward to it.
Absolutely. Please have a great day, and thank you so much for joining us.